I'm Tom Lord-Alge. We're at Abbey Road Institute, and look at this magnificent console. So I'm here doing a master class for the students here at Abbey Road Institute, and I gotta tell you, I am taking this console home with me. It is a 96 input SSL 9000K, and it is magnifique. And I absolutely love it, and so far I'm having a wonderful time here talking with the students. And today we're going to talk about mixing, music. Myself, my brother Jeff, and my brother Chris were very close in age, all a year apart from each other. So we ended up kind of, hanging out together. And my older siblings, my sister Lisa, my brother Mark, and my sister Meg, my parents saw that Chris, Jeff, and myself were going to be trouble, and we're going to be a bad influence. So they kind of shipped my older siblings off away to private school. And during this period of time, my parents separated and they got divorced, and we were raised by my mother. My mother is a jazz performer. She's a jazz pianist, a jazz educator, as well as a jazz singer. So during the years when I was growing up, probably from maybe age 8 or 9, we were always immersed in music. And my father, who was also around a little bit at the time, was in the jukebox business. So we always had music in the house, whether it was the worst style of music, which was jukebox, because nothing sounds worse than a jukebox. But we had music, to jazz music, which was been my mother and her trio, rehearsing in the living room of the house. So we always had music. And through a friend of my mother's, my brother Chris got his first job at H&L Recording Studios in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, which ended up being bought by the Sugar Hill Gang record company, or Sugar Hill Records, where they did, Rapper's Delight and all the very early rap records. It was the birth of hip hop and rap, and those were records that my brother Chris worked on. I chose a different route and went into lighting. I always enjoyed lighting, but always knew audio. But at 16, I was offered a job to tour as a lighting director, and my mom said it was okay. As the story goes, one night the front of house engineer got ill and couldn't mix, and the band asked me to mix, and of course I said, "Can I do lights as well?" And they said no, because I really like lighting. But I guess I did a good mix, because the next night I was hired as the front of house engineer, and I've never looked back. So I did front of house for live sound for 5 years. And during that period of time, my brother Chris moved to a studio in New York City called Unique Recording. And he had been bothering me. He saw that, that I could do the studio work, and he needed help, because he was starting to create a name for himself. And he saw the potential that it would be good for me to come in and maybe help him out. So eventually one year I took him up on it. I had a dispute with the band. And I just pretty much quit, sold all my gear, and within a week I started working at Unique Recording, in which I was immediately thrown into the fire. I would sit on the couch in the back of the control room, watch my brother work, and then he would just walk out of the room, while a vocal was being recorded. And he didn't ask. I just, as soon as he walked out of the room, I just sat right in the seat and did whatever I had to do. I just basically mirrored what I saw him doing. And one of the first sessions that I did was James Brown, Living in America. And I was scared shitless. I had no right to be there, but I did what I had to do. And, later in life, Chris said, I had to see what you were made of. He did all the dirty work, so I didn't have to. He was the one that started in the studio with cleaning toilets and making coffee, wrapping mic cables. I walked into the studio, I never had to do that. So I'm always, very thankful that my brother Chris, sacrificed that, and I didn't have to. So I'm always thankful for that. Chris started to focus his energies more on becoming a mixing engineer. So Chris and I both admired Bob Clearmountain. He was kind of the guy that we looked up to. Bob, I think, was really responsible for creating the title mix engineer. And Chris and I always thought that as a team, as Lord-Alge's, we felt as long as one of us is doing the project, we were cool with it, keep it in the family. So we used to use the terms, we're going to clear the mountain. Meaning, we were very much influenced by the style in which Bob Clearmountain mixed. I'd like to think that we took some of his bits that we felt were our favorite and made them our own. So yeah, Bob definitely was a huge influence, in my mixing style, as well as my brother Chris's, and again, and we can speak with Eddie Kramer and Alan Parsons, but I think during that period of time in the 80s, it was really, it was Bob. The one really cool thing about having older brothers that were doing the same thing and all being in competition with each other is, Chris and I we just would jokingly go, okay, who can have a hit record with the loudest snare drum? And honestly, it's just as stupid and simple as that, Chris and I were just in competition to see who could get the louder snare drum, who could have a hit record with a song that had the loudest snare drum. And I mean, I think to this day, we certainly, I don't think we go for that anymore, but we certainly always have had a certain affinity toward drum sounds. We both are big fans of Phil Collins and the early Genesis stuff. Phil's drum sound has been a major impact on both Chris's and my career and how we approach, drums and at being the main kind of focal point. The students here at the Abbey Road Institute are, our future in recording engineers and producers and possibly artists. I mean, I met some talented individuals who are musicians. I met talented individuals that are songwriters. I met talented individuals that want to be engineers. What I focused on with them was just sharing my wisdom of the years of being in the recording industry, of being a mixer, sharing stories about inspiration, showing tricks, and letting them know that, we as recording engineers are the keeper of the vibe. So know your rig, know your gear, and remember, it's not about the gear, it's about your ears. So trust in what you hear and be the keeper of the vibe. So always keep the vibe, when you're recording, especially if there's a band in the room. You want to be quick. You want to get a good sound immediately because good sounds inspire great performances. And it's your session, so control the session, keep it light, keep everybody laughing, keep it creative. When people ask me or approach me about mixing a project for them, I think what they're looking for is they're looking for a professional sound, or maybe a different take. Nowadays, what you have is you have cats that are recording their records either in their homes or in a pro studio, but they're working with the same guys, from the beginning up until the point where they say that they're finished. And I think they're just looking to get another perspective, a different set of ears. I've always felt that that's been my strong suit, that I can come in at the end of a project with just fresh ears. I'm not married to any of the parts, so I can make decisions based on what I feel are best for this particular song. So I think that that's what they're looking for. It's just a set of fresh ears. I mean, obviously, and to make it sound better, obviously. I've been very fortunate to have come through the music industry in a time, where there were record sales, where there was a physical product being sold, where, music has value, where people actually, purchased music. I think the industry is beginning to catch up now, and they're beginning to monetize with the streaming, and which is wonderful for artists and songwriters because they should be compensated for their for their performance and their materials. As far as the technology goes, I'm gonna miss, I'm gonna miss this console. I'm gonna miss this style of working. I don't see the next generation of musicians or recording engineers utilizing this type of technology because now it could all be done on the computer. Back in the days of mixing analog, completely analog, with all this outboard gear, I would only have 40 or 50 different colors. Let's call the outboard gear colors. So I would only have maybe 40 different colors that I could use to paint this picture. You know, now with digital audio workstations, I have 4,000 colors. So the picture now has become much more vibrant. And all of these different plugins emulated of pieces of hardware all have their own unique character. It opens up this whole new creative door, which again wasn't there before. So it's, for me, I've embraced it over the past 15 or 17 years that I've been using Pro Tools. And again, have just gotten to the point where, well, not just gotten to the point, but gotten to the point where if I didn't have an analog console, I can still get my mix. You know, I bring my laptop with me now, and I'm able to do my editing and actually do, if I need to do work when I'm traveling, I can do that. And it's a wonderful luxury to have. You know, I have a little set of monitors I set up in my hotel room, and I have my, you know, my little rig, and it all works out great. And it's great because when I get home, then I just, you know, in my crucial listening environment, I can do my little tweaks, and then my mix is done. But I see the future as everybody's going to be mixing in their boats and on their, you know, laptops and in their apartments. And one of the things that I wanted to focus on when I did the master class was, and I know the students have access to this console, was that I would put up, you know, some of my old analog sessions that have no plugins in it. So we put it up, and then I just left the room and let the students have their way with the console, you know, and some old analog, you know, sessions that had been transferred to Pro Tools. And it was fun to see some of them just dive right into the console, you know, and go into the EQs and the compression. You know, some were a little bit less, you know, maybe were a little, wanted to be a little more reserved about it. But it was definitely fun to see this generation, new generation of engineers, producers, musicians, you know, enjoying, you know, actually physically touching and manipulating an old school analog console. So I've really spent time over the 15 years that I've been using Pro Tools to really learn the program, because I never knew if at one point I may not have a console. Because again, the state of the recording industry has changed so much over the past 2 decades. You know, we've seen a lot of recording studios in the United States close, and you know, now I own my own SSL, so it's not an issue. But over the past 15 or 17 years I've been using Pro Tools, it was important to me to become proficient in it, and just in case I didn't have a console. So I spent a lot of time and energy learning the program and learning how to work it, that if I needed to mix within the box, that I can mix within the box. So I can show you a session that I did with an artist, for an artist named Dave Kersner, and it was a demonstration that I did for a company called IK Multimedia. And we're going to open up that session. I'm going to walk you through some of the things. And it's a completely in-the-box mix. And it sounds freaking phenomenal. So let's take a look at that session. So let me tell you a little bit about the artist. The artist I'm going to show you. His name is Dave Kersner. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's a very talented musician, songwriter, singer, and keyboard player. The session that we're opening up is a song called Stranded that I mixed in 2017. I mixed it in Pro Tools, and I mixed it also on my SSL 4000 G+. For a demonstration for the NAMM show of 2018, IK Multimedia and Dave asked me if I would mix a version of the song in the box, only using IK Multimedia plugins. So I felt that this would be a good session to show you. Now, this particular session uses IK Multimedia plugins. My original session used a whole host of plugins. What I did with this session is I actually took the original version, the original plugin version, whether it be Waves or Universal Audio, and then I would duplicate the channel and copy the settings to the IK Multimedia plugin. Again, this was just to demonstrate the plugins. And I was shocked, actually, at how close they sounded to each other. There were subtle differences. Again, I always say, it's not the plugin, it's not the gear, it's your ear. It's how you use it. So this is, what I'm showing you is based more out of that this is a session that I already have set up, mixed in the box, and that I can play for you with ease, and we can discuss kind of some of the tricks that I do, or some of the things that I do, and it is a song that's called Stranded. And it features a guitar player playing guitar solo. His name is Steve Hackett. Steve Hackett was the original guitar player in Genesis during the Peter Gabriel era. And he also did the first two albums that Phil Collins sang on in 1976 called Trick of the Tail, and an album called Wind and Wuthering, which was done in 1977, one of my idols. So what you're hearing now is Stranded mixed in the box using all IK multimedia plugins. So we can look at the drums again on this particular on this particular song. I am using some samples. Let's just get right down to it. So those of you who are familiar with my workflow probably know my kick and snare trigger track. You know, it's one of the things that I do to take the handcuffs off of me, so that I can either A, control leakage for kick and snare drums, and B, trigger drum samples. So on this particular song, I did it for both. So although we don't see a gate plugged in to the bass drum or snare drum on this was mixed on my old Pro Tools Excel system, and those plugins were no longer available to me. So I printed the gate. So we're going to assume that we're running a gate. So for the bass drum, I mean, obviously, again, we're just looking to make the bass drum have a little impact, you know, a little point. So for this, we have a bass drum in mic, you know, obviously the close mic, you know, which I'm really just kind of using for the snap. And on this one, we have, you know, again, we're using the T-Rax. This is the T-Rax British channel, and this is an emulation of the SSL 4000. So it's actually quite good. And you can see we're adding a bit of 6K for the point and a significant amount of bottom, because I felt that it just needed to have some of that bottom, you know, and I'm probably doing a similar thing to the bottom, to the out mic. If we go to the out mic again, it is the British channel. Oh, and yes, we are adding quite a bit of compression. You know, on the close mic, not so much so. You see the ratio is 1.9 to 1, so it's not a very high ratio, okay? But it's just enough to level it out a little bit. And then when we look at the out mic, you know, the out mic would have a fast attack, and I'm going for a vibe on the out mic. So you can see on the out mic, I'm adding a lot of 3K, okay? So what I'm trying to do with the out mic, there's a knock, if you hear that kind of 3K knock. So I was looking to use the out mic, and the 3K kind of that area is a little trick that I stole from Start Me Up by Bob Clearmountain mix. So the bass drum has this really nice mid-rangey knock, and I always really like that. So I usually use the out mic of a bass drum to kind of get that kind of knock, because I like what that does. And then again, on this one, I have a bass drum sample, which just happens to be a sample that was from a Weezer record, you know, and again, so when we add that in, you know, we have the whole bass drum sandwich. You know, it just gives it a little bit more point and definition. And again, because this was a sample, I've already probably manipulated it, so I'm just adding a bit of 50 cycles to give it more punch. And then I'm running it through the T-Rax 1176 or the Black 76 plugin, again, because it was just the effect how I did it in the original mix. So again, I'm using just to give the Weezer foot, just to give it a little bit more impact, okay? And then one of my favorite things that I also like to do is to add ambient samples. So this would be all the bass drums now playing together. So adding the bass drum ambient track, again, just gives it a stereo width. And again, that would have been going through a 1073 you know, and on this we're using the T-Rax 1073. And again, you can see we're just adding a touch of 3K and forgot just a very little bit of 60 cycles. And that would cover the bass drum. And again, so remember, this is all done within the box, okay? And then we'll go down to the snare drum. So I'm gonna unsolo these channels. So this is a live snare drum. So now again, remember that I mixed this on my old Excel system using the Drummer gate, which is no longer available to me. And it was just easier for me to just open up the old session, print the new track with the gate. So assume that the gate is in there, it's already been printed. So here's soloing the top mic of the snare drum. You know, and as you can hear obviously the gate doing its work. And there is a few plugins on here. So again, we start with the 1081, you know, again, which is my starting EQ. So what have we got there? We got some 4K. We have quite a bit of 6K, you know, and then from there, I'm going to just say it might be going into a limiter. And it is. It's going into the T-Rax Precision Comp, which is, again, an emulation of the 33609. Okay, and then from there, I'm going to guess we might be going into some saturation. Let's see if I'm right. Yes. Okay. So one of my favorite tricks, I love always love the 33609. 33609 always gave. I love the quick. I always use it. If those of you watching at home noticed that I'm using the 33609 in limit mode only. Oh no, I lie. I see I have the compressor mode in, but I guarantee you the compressor mode's not doing anything because I have the threshold set up really high. But I am using it in limit mode, okay? And I use it as a fast attack. And what it does is it adds, I love the way the release is. So it gives the snare more sustain. In fast attack, it's still a touch too transient for me. So I add a saturation program. And this was the one that I chose to use, was the T-Rax Saturator X. Again, very similar to any of the other saturator plugins that are out there. They're again, it's not it's not the plugin, it's not the gear, it's how you use it, it's your ear. And the fourth plugin is, yes, it's just a little, actually the fourth plugin is my De-Esser trick. Okay, so it is not finishing equalization, it is de-essing. So what I felt is when he was hitting his hi-hat, so you see when I take it out, when I hit bypass, actually when I hit bypass on the plugin using the bypass here, you can hear just, there's a little bit of that top frequency that I found a little annoying. Now I put it back in, and you can hear it just disappears ever so slightly. That's always been one of my tricks. I used to use the hardware DBX 902 to remove offending frequencies, high frequencies from a close mic snare drum. Okay, so that would be my snare drum chain. And again, look, you guys are going to rewind this, and you're going to try all these settings, and you're going to get different results. Everything is different. Use your ear. Just make it sound great. There's no set way. There's no, well, TLA used it this way, how come I can't get it this way? It's how you hear it. It's all how you hear it. You know, I always tell people I can get the same results with any set of plugins. I just happen to enjoy these particular ones, and this was a demonstration for T-Rax, or for IK Multimedia. And again, on the bottom microphone, we ran it through the gate, and the bottom microphone of the snare drum, again, should have a lot of compression. Right. And because I liked the bottom microphone on the, you can see we're doing 14 dB fast attack at infinity to 1, you know, and because there is a certain vibe on the bottom microphone of the snare drum, I sent the bottom microphone to the snare reverb. So actually the top mic of the snare drum does not go to the reverb, but the bottom mic does. So, and that's all that's on there. And let's see what we're using as the reverb. Yes, you guessed it. It is the IK Multimedia Classic Room. I'm a big fan of the Sony Deary 2000 reverb, so I was a little surprised when I put this up and thought, ooh, this sounds kind of similar. So I ended up using it, which was surprising. It's actually a very good reverb. And then after that, I'm just adding a little bit of equalization to the reverb itself and a little bit of compression. Now, in full disclosure, there is also some snare samples going on here. So first, let's go to the October Sky. This just happened to be the name of a song that I mixed, and that's how I name samples. If I'm pinching samples from records that I mix, you know, I would name them the song title. So thank you, Kensington. I really appreciated the snare drum, and it's brilliant. So here's the snare sample. Okay, and with that, again, we're adding, again, just a little bit of that T-Rex British channel, which is the SSL emulation, fast attack, infinity to 1, spanking the living piss out of it, you know, adding quite a bit of top end, and then putting a little bit of notch in that, you know, 100 area, just to give it a little bit of oomph, you know, and then sending it through a reverb. That actually, and this one I'm actually just using the reverb right on the insert. Okay, so when you hear all, let's put those 3 tracks together and hear what that sounds like. And that would sound something like this. And then, of course, the final key to our snare drum puzzle would be the KM snare drum ambience. Now, I can't remember what KM stood for, so let's hear it. I don't remember what KM stands for, but I know this sample, and what this sample was, I believe that this was actually a tom-tom microphone that just had a really nice ring to it when it hit the snare drum. So I just, again, and so let's hear. See, now you all have it to pinch. Please don't steal my samples. Of course you're going to steal them. It's okay. It's okay, because you no matter what you do, it's going to sound different than what I do. But have at it. Have at it. So here's the whole snare drum. There's the whole snare drum puzzle. And there's a couple of nice clean hits for you that you guys can have and do what you want with. So there's talking about the kick in the snare drum. And again, we can go through the tom-toms, but just really briefly with the tom-toms, what I do to the tom-toms is I like to make them sound like tuned bass drums. So basically I treat them as if they were a bass drum, just with different tuning notes, okay? And again, for those of you that have looked at some of my other videos, let's solo the tom-tom tracks, and I'm gonna shut off the reverb on the tom-tom tracks just to show you some of one of the tricks that I do, because I want you to hear one of my tom-tom tricks. And let's see if it does it in this section. So here's 3 tom-tom hits. Right, now, for those of you at home that heard that, you noticed that, first of all, they sound pretty damn good, because I am the man, and they are tuned bass drums. But more importantly, what you heard was you heard sustain. So when the downbeat hit and the cymbal hit happened, let me play this other part where all 4 hit, might be even a bigger one. You noticed that for some reason, all of a sudden, the cymbal didn't become an issue. So I don't know how many of you out there have had an issue when you're equalizing your tom-toms, that when you hit the downbeat, when the drummer hits the downbeat, all of a sudden this beautiful sounding tom-tom makes your cymbal sound like shit. Okay, so this is the trick. So once again, listen to it again. The trick is very simple. All you do is use an equalizer and use it in Audio Suite, and literally at the cymbal hit, just roll the top end off. And this way you get to keep the sustain of the tom-tom without having the cymbal. Because most people cut it off on the downbeat, and you lose the sustain, and it sounds unnatural. So now let's hear what we did with the reverb. Again, the reverb is going to be, you know, and again, we'll look at the toms. I can tell you, oh, okay, so on the tom-toms, we just used some program EQ and probably some compression. There you go. So it was 1176s. And again, just the emulation of the API graphic EQ. It just happened to be what I used on these mixes when I did the mixes. I've always been a big fan of graphic equalizers. It's kind of the first piece of equipment I ever bought was the Sound Craftsman, as I said earlier, the Sound Craftsman Dual 10 band. They're just really easy to work. it's like boom, they're kind of dummy proof. Whereas the parametric equalizers, you can get a little bit more fine tuning into it. But for this, I just felt they worked really well. So when we turn the reverb on, it gives it a nice sound. So we can sit here and go through everything that I've done on the rest of the drum set, but the rest of the stuff you all know about. It's going to be compression, equalizer. So let's take a listen to the whole drum set. I have the whole drum set soloed, and we're going to take it right from that drum fill. So now the whole drum set sounds like this. And again, so all done within the box. And you can see, for those of you that can see the vision, you can see that I have some volume rights on my Tom Reverb. I really liked what the Tom Reverb was doing, and I didn't want to change the sustain, so I felt that it sounded best if I just faded out on some of these fills. So you can see, I did do some automation on the tom-tom fills to make it work in the song. On its own, it sounds fine. In the song, I felt that with that extra bit of sustain without that fade, I preferred it with the fade, so I ended up keeping it with the fade. So you can see right from the second that I hit play, you see a big level jump. So I do it quite often where on big drum fills, I'll take room mics and I may, just flood it up a little bit, or turn the volume of just the room up for some of the drum fills. And I see that on this particular song, there's no exception, that I did it certainly on that part there. And if we looked at the automation, let's say, yeah, you can see there's automation in there. And you can see on a lot of the fills, I actually put automation moves in. And what I was trying to achieve there was, again, just to create some more space around some of the tom-tom fills. And again, just to make them sound bigger. So on the rooms, again, I'm going to say that we probably have the SSL. Yeah, we have the British channel, the TRX British channel, which is the SSL emulation. And that is going into, and again, it's just, on this particular one, I see that I'm trying to get some cymbals, some of the cymbal ambience to come out. So I'm adding a bit of 13K, which again is a little unusual for me. I normally don't go up that high, but maybe, I was looking just to get some ambience. Maybe I felt the cymbal sounded too direct and I want to get some of that ultra high end to come out of the room mics, and we'll see what they're doing there. I'm sure that there's some, yeah, I see we're not really tapping the compressor that hard. And then on the, after that, right, because I'm not really using the compressor because I'm going through the 1176. So that's why. So again, remember, these are sessions that, I copied from, other plug-in manufacturers, and was again shocked at how good these plug-ins sound. So I see on the right side of the room that I have a third plug-in in. I'm just going to take a guess and say it might be a De-Esser, because maybe the hi-hat, which I like to put the hi-hat on the right side because I like to mix drums audience perspective. So when I hear a drum set, I'm always looking at the drummer. I am not the drummer. So I'm going to guess that that's what it is, and that's exactly what it is. So that was just to reduce some of the level of the hi-hat. And again, you see it's just set to those frequencies. So it's not reducing, it's not going to be reducing anything but 7.21K and above. And again, just set up to minimize some of the hi-hat in the room microphones. Again, it's a handy little trick, and it works on so many different levels. The hi-hat should be no surprise here. Bingo, winner, winner, pigeon dinner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Again, I'm a big fan of crushing a hi-hat with a fast attack. So yeah, you can see I'm adding quite a bit of 12K. It just seemed what was working, for this particular mix. So, and those of you that are getting a close-up look, just in case you can't see, one thing you can do with these IK multimedia plugins is you can do this. you can make them even bigger. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm actually adjusting the output. So I've learned that let's drive the input of the plug-in to let it do its thing, and then I make the adjustments on the output. I like to run my sessions with my outputs at 0, and the only ones that you see that aren't at 0 are ones that contain automation, and the ones that contain automations will have the automation turned on. Okay, so on this particular mix, I set up some Vca subs, and the Vca subs are actually doing all the work for a lot of the drum rides, except for, again, some of those drum fills and stuff like that. So that covers the hi-hat. So we're almost done with the complete kit, but you can see there up on the top there would be my Vca groups. Again, I just found it for this particular mix, it was more convenient and easier for me to manipulate some of these parts via those. But again, as you scroll through my session, you'll see most of my gains are all set to 0. Okay, and then anything that has automation, you can see I have the automation turned on. This way I can tell this track has no automation. See, no automation. This track, because it's in read mode, has automation, and yes, you see I'm automating a plug-in and I'm automating volume. Again, it's just a quick and easy way for me to visually immediately look at it. And then again, for me, by having my levels at 0 and controlling the outputs of the plugins, in case I bump something, I know 0 is 0. And if there's no automation and it's not reading 0, I know that I bumped it. And how many of you guys have done that? And it sucks when it happens, because you're like, God, did I have it at minus 8.3 or minus 7.2? No, I had it at 0. 0 is 0. Just the way that I mix. Of course, and last but not least, we have cymbals. Shocking. It's the SSL plugin. I know I sound like a broken record, but again, we're just adding. Again, so obviously I felt that 12K was the magic number on this one. So we're adding, 8.5 dB of compression on 12K, and I am adding in. I'm adding in a little bit of that 300 or 250, just to get a little bit of sound around the snare drum, to add a little bit of warmth to the snare drum. But yeah, you can hear a lot of that ultra top end, and I'm also adding in a bit of 4K. And that kind of covers the drum set. And then so in the box, when we go back to soloing the whole drum set, the one thing that I didn't show you, that I should show you, because I'm sure that you're all very interested, because you're all going, yeah, but I see a drum sub. I see that your drums are coming out of a sub. Yeah, you got me. So they are getting mashed, so I'm doing a little finishing EQ. So, you can see that I'm adding 4 dB of 6K and 2.5 dB of 60 cycles, just to give it a little bit more top end, because obviously I felt that I might have been adding too much 14K, and maybe I needed a little bit more lower of the high frequencies. So again, this was my finishing EQ. Very similar to what I would have done on a console. I just would have done on a console, but I did it here. So remember when I did this mix, I didn't have the drum sub. I had an SSL. But on this I used the drum sub, and then we finish it off again by putting it through the T-Rax bus compressor, which again is the emulation of the solid state logic. And as you can also see, I am not afraid to mash it. So we're looking at a high dB of compression at a very low ratio. So although I am doing 12, banging 12 dB of compression, it's done at a low compression ratio. And I'm adding a bit of the grit. So let's see what it sounds like if I take it out. For me, what I hear, and obviously you see I'm really just banging it to get the top and the mid-range pulled together. Because those of you notice, if we zoom in on the goo, let's zoom in on the goo. So you can see I'm really only compressing from 500 and above. So I'm keeping the bottom end as intact, and I'm really just using it to kind of control the mid-range and the top end of the drum set. And that's it. So that's why, and I add the little grid feature as well. So there's your drum set for Stranded. I'd like to, while we're right at this part of the song, maybe some of the listeners might be interested in actually hearing what the song sounds like. So one thing, now that we've walked through the drum set and we've walked through the individual components of the drum set, and you've heard and saw some of the spank that I was doing and some of the compression that I was doing in the drum set, I bet you're all kind of interested as what's on my master fader. It's interesting because I hope that you all feel that this mix sounds really good, because I think it sounds pretty darn good for an in-the-box mix. And this is, everything you're hearing, we're not using this console whatsoever. As you can see, it's all in the box. And some of you might be thinking, wow, there's only one plugin on the master fader. What plugin is that? Well, as you can see, you got it. It's the IK Multimedia 1. This was something that was new to me, and it was new for me for this demonstration. And this has become a plugin that I've absolutely fallen in love with. It's a mastering plugin, and I think that it replaces the 5 plugins that you're all using on your master fader. In my opinion, if you're using more than 2 plugins on your master fader, there's something wrong with your mix. But I was shocked at how wonderful this plugin is and how versatile it is. And this is the only plugin that I'm using on the master fader, and I think it sounds absolutely magnificent. And yeah, and if we play, let's just let's go to the part where Steve Hackett plays his little solo. Well, not his little solo. Let's go to the spot where Steve Hackett plays his solo. And what we'll do is we'll do a little experiment where we'll listen to what Steve is doing. So here is with the plugin in, and then now here's with the bypass. Yeah, it's quite a difference. You know, not only does it add, obviously, the volume that we're all looking for, and again, I keep the volume at a reasonable level. I mean, we're hitting at the peak, certainly, but it certainly is by no means brick-walled. Again, let's bypass it. Right, so it's quite a noticeable difference. So that's what we're using on the master fader, and that covers us digesting and talking about Dave Kersner's Stranded. So I'd like to thank you all for taking time to take a look at this. And once again, I'm Tom Lord-Alge from the Abbey Road Institute here in Paris, France. Bonsoir.